Let's face it, as guitar players, we're a little distractible. Happens to me all the time. Somebody drops a new video on YouTube, much like this one, and I'm off on a wild goose chase. A butterfly flies by, and hours later, I don't know if I've really gotten any value out of it. Sometimes we can do this at the expense of other, more important things to be studying. And what I mean by more important is solid, real solutions that build lasting impact on our capability as guitar players, and more importantly, as musicians. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you'll learn about intervals. Now, I did a version of this video a while back, but there are more viewers here now, and I wanted to get in front of everybody because I think this is an important thing. Like I said, there are some sort of formative, solid solutions that we can be studying that really bring about better musicianship for us. The study of intervals is one of those things. I'm going to briefly describe intervals, and then we're going to zoom in and really take a look at how to integrate intervals into our playing, and more specifically, how to understand where they are on the neck and what they sound like. Intervals are simply the distance between two notes, but these distances really make up the DNA, the sort of building blocks of music. Just imagine, any melody you ever hear is a string of intervals, right? Each note is a distance from the next one. Every chord you ever play is a stack of intervals. Each one of these notes is a distance from the other. So everything you ever hear is really a series of intervals. That's why it's really important to start to get to know these things, because it turns out that the personality of these intervals is what makes up our capability to listen to music and have some sort of emotional response. So as you can see, they're very, very fundamental. In the 12-tone system, we only have 12 notes. So this is modern Western music. These 12 notes are all a half step apart, and you can visualize this very easily as the distance between the nut and the 12th fret on your guitar, right? Those are the only 12 notes we ever get. And each one of those distances has a unique personality back to the context. In other words, the starting point, that distance between the starting point and that new interval. We're going to zoom in and just look at the intervals in a major scale to start to build the skill to be able to see and hear and play these intervals, right? To get to know them. Right? Because these building blocks are obviously very important. Putting them on the instrument, not on a piece of paper somewhere, is going to be critical and crucial for our capability to actually play music with some intent. Let me zoom in and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so intervals, just the distance between two notes. This lesson is going to be very, very handy if you haven't spent any time on intervals. It's going to be a really good starter for you. We're just going to use a G major scale. Simply number the notes in the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're back to the root again. That's our G note again. Root, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Those are just the numbers of the notes as they occur in sequence, but they're also the name of the distance between that root and that note. So this second note, that's the interval of a second. The third note, 1, 2, 3, that's the interval of a third, etc. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to play these as dyads. In other words, play the two notes at the same time so we can hear the relationship of this interval. Hear what it sounds like. What kind of, is it a tense interval? Is it a relaxed interval? Is it stable or non-stable? And you'll hear this as we go through. So here's our root. Here's our second note. This is the distance, the interval of a major second. It's a bit of a dissonant interval. And you're going to hear that especially now when we go to the major third. Root, 2, 3. Here's our third. In other words, the root and the third being played at the same time. Listen to the difference between those. Right? So that's very unstable. That's very stable. The next note is the fourth note. 1, 2, 3, 4. Playing the root and the fourth note at the same time. This is called a perfect fourth, this interval. It's called perfect because it's very, very stable. The fifth note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's called a perfect fifth. That's called a perfect interval because it's also very, very stable. The sixth note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this distance, this interval is called a major sixth. The seventh note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, These two notes together are the distance or the interval of a major seventh. That's got quite a bit of tension to it. And you'll hear that as we resolve to the eighth note or the octave, back to the G again. So here's that whole exercise. I'm just going to say them and play through them as dyads. In other words, playing them at the same time. Here's our root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and then the octave. It's a really good exercise to get these sounds, sort of the personality of these intervals, in your hands and in your ears. Right? It's a really, really good exercise. When you do this, you also might want to play the notes as individual notes and just go back and forth like this. Here's our second. Here's our major third. Here's our perfect fourth. Perfect fifth. Major sixth, major seventh, and octave. Right? Both as dyads and as sort of individual notes. You hear that distance as a melody. Now I want to show you a couple of practical applications. That song that I played at the top is called Messages from Her. The chord progression is D minor to A minor to C and to G. Now that chord progression sounds really pretty with these big chords, but the original recording of the song, the guitar part just uses intervals to outline these same chords. And those intervals are thirds. So here's the root of our D minor chord, and here's the third. On the A minor chord, here's our root, and here's our minor third here. On the C chord, here's our root and our major third. And on the G major, there's our root and our third. So here's the guitar part from that recording. It sounds like this. Much more sparse, right, than this. It creates a total mood because it isolates these intervals, and all you're hearing is these intervals of major and minor thirds. It really generates some mood just using those intervals. In that same song, there's a vocal harmony that goes like this. That guitar part, just that two-note part, are dyads, and they're using the interval of a third. So this is a minor third. And if you recall, the chord is D minor. This is simply the root and the minor third of the D minor. And it's just using those thirds going up and down the scale. This happens to be the minor third and the root of the A minor chord. These same two notes are the root and the major third of our C chord, which is next, up and down the scale. That is the root and the third of our G chord. So we're just using these intervals of major and minor thirds going through the scale, and this happens to be in the key of C. Just using these thirds to outline this beautiful harmony. So in this one song, a couple of great examples of a guitar player using intervals to create a mood, right? And to generate some real beautiful sounds just using intervals. Okay, so just using the major scale, we can start to get to know these intervals and listen to the distances and how these distances actually have some personality. As we saw, some were very unstable, some sounded more stable, right? It's the movement between stability and instability in music that gives us that emotional response, right? So these intervals are incredibly important. We can learn licks all day. You can learn a new scale. You can learn a bunch of new chords. You can play along with songs. But until you really start to internalize your understanding of intervals, you're not going to know how to recreate the things you hear. And ultimately, what we're all here to do is recreate the things we prefer. Turn our musical preference, what we like to hear, into our musical capability. Now we can play that thing. Tabs for this lesson, like all the lessons on this channel, are available on my Patreon page. Head on over there if you want to grab them. And if you do decide to support the channel, I thank you in advance. As always, I hope this was helpful. I hope you found this interesting. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.